Welcome to Writer, where we meet the authors you love and introduce you to new authors and books for your TBR list. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer. My guest today is author Florence Wetzel. Her new book, SARA My SARA, a memoir of friendship and loss, is a poignant memoir of enduring friendship in the face of terminal illness. Her other novels include The Woman Who Went Overboard, a thriller, The Grand Man, a Swedish mystery. She has also written horror short stories, a book of poems, and memoir essays. It's so good to see you, Florence. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you too, Kat.
So this is your first full-length memoir, is that correct?
Yes, it's true. I self-published a book of poems with about 5 or 6 very short sort of memoir essays at the end of it. I published that maybe about 10 years ago or something, but this is my first full-length memoir.
How was it going from fiction to memoir?
No, it's very interesting. Sarah My Sarah is divided into 3 parts. And the first part, the main character, the main person is mostly my mother. And because Sarah came into our lives because she started out as my mother's housekeeper, but quickly became like a part of the family and became her caretaker. And then the second part, I would say that Sarah is at the center of it. It's, when she has her illness, the 17 months of her illness. And then there's the third part. And it's so funny, when I started writing it, I was like, wait a second, this is all about me. I don't want to do that. And I realized it's time to write about yourself. I mean, obviously I show up a lot in the first and second parts, but the third part is just about me and my grieving and what I was going through at that time. And it was a little startling because I never thought of writing fiction as I'm hiding behind my characters, but I guess I hide behind my characters, they can say anything and do anything. And I just sort of, it's not me.
Yeah.
So this was really interesting. This was me. And then also because of the nature of the story and wanting to be very honest, I wrote things about myself that were not particularly flattering. An example of that would be, I think that a lot of people that have experienced strong grief, you experience anger. And so I write about some of that, you know, encounters with red velvet cupcakes, like that.
Yeah.
I didn't polish myself up, but but I kind of got over that because I realized that's what the book needed. This was, just to be real about what one goes through when one best friend has this, devastating illness, then afterwards the emptiness, which it was an emptiness because I lost my mom and then I lost Sarah. So, yeah, so there was no point trying to cover things up or pretty things up. I wanted to be very honest. So I got used to that.
And it's not a spoiler to tell readers that this was the best friend had brain cancer.
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, that's what I have right at the beginning. There's a little prequel. Yes, Sarah was diagnosed with glioblastoma, and this is an aggressive brain cancer. It's interesting because I had read that most of brain tumors are actually benign, but glioblastoma is very aggressive, and most people who get it don't live more than 15 months or 2 years. There are the exceptions, but that's what she got. So it really was a worst case scenario.
And as cancers go, and you and I discussed a little bit before the show that I am also I'm a cancer survivor multiple times, and I think that brain cancer can be a very difficult one. And I was really glad to see you writing about this because it's more than losing the person; it's losing the person a little at a time in real time.
Exactly. And the thing about glioblastoma is so much depends upon where the tumor is, because some people have from the beginning of their diagnosis, they have very severe personality changes and very like outbursts of anger and things like that. And, but other people, they just do sort of, I would say, strange things. I had a friend someone who at her job had glioblastoma, they didn't know it. And she would come in wearing these outfits, just these like garish, plaids and polka dots and things like that. Like sometimes it's more
Yeah.
like your judgment.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's also physical effects, and that can be anything from memory loss to seizures to so you don't know. So it's you get the diagnosis, and there's this whole range of things that might happen. And so it's very frightening. You get the diagnosis, and then it's like there's this smorgasbord of things that might happen and so you're trying to live in the moment, but you're always keeping your eye out for those little changes to be like, okay, is that happening now, or is that happening? So it's painful, and there's something I didn't know about called anticipatory grief.
Yes.
And that can be knowing that someone's going to die. But in this case, as you said, it's the anticipatory grief of how is this going to manifest? And one of the things I repeat during the book, especially at the beginning of Sarah's illness, is like, I was like, well, Sarah's still Sarah. Like, so I was lucky. She was lucky for a very long time. She was just herself. Nothing really changed. She wasn't, so I held on to that, but knowing all the time that the day will come when Sarah will not quite be Sarah anymore. So it's a tough one. It's a real tough one.
And interesting too that you met her when you were going through an issue with your mom and the friendship developed, and then very quickly you were faced with losing her.
Yeah, it really was strange. It was so 2013, my father died, and my mom was then by herself in her four-bedroom house in New Jersey. And I moved back. I was living in Colorado at the time, and I was freelancing. So I would come back. I came back like once a month, and I saw pretty quickly, like my mom needed help.
Yeah.
She wasn't ill, but my father had she was just alone after 56 years of marriage. My
Yeah.
dad had taken care of all the finances. And she had a housekeeper for a very long time. But what happened was that housekeeper was Brazilian, and that housekeeper's mom got sick. So she had to go to Brazil. So my mom suddenly needed someone else. And Sarah worked for one of my mom's three masseuses. And so this woman suggested, well, why don't you hire Sarah? So she did. So they already knew each other from when my mom would go to this woman's house to get massages. And it's interesting because, as I say in the book, because my mom and Sarah knew each other, they just clicked. They just clicked. They had the same sense of humor. They made each other laugh. They liked spending time together. So for me, that was great that my mom had company, and I was always really friendly to Sarah, and I saw her in the house 3 times a week um, but we didn't like really form a bond. But then what started happening was my mom started getting very weak, and all kinds of issues came up, like the fact that she couldn't see but was still driving, that was.
Mhm.
So Sarah and I just kind of slowly became a team, taking care of my mom. And as often can happen, is my mom didn't want to listen to me, but she would listen to Sarah. So Sarah and I became very close. And then when my mom died, which was in May 2017, Sarah and I were bonded by our grief
Yeah.
for my mom. And we just got really close. We just got really close really quick. And yeah. And I say she's my best friend. I probably have like a couple best friends, but she really was. We became very, very close very quickly. And we also just got along, we just clicked.
Yeah. I went through a similar situation with my father, and we got a caregiver for him, and she was just, there, I mean, available, and she was hilarious with him. And she used to embarrass him in public on purpose, and he would pretend to be all mad, but really he just adored her. And at the end, when he was 92, and we all knew it was the end. And she just took care of things. But at the end, she called me hysterical and said, I came to work and JoJo's not here. And I said, I, I mean, like, and I didn't know what to say. And she said, can I come to the funeral? And
Oh,
she did. And she became family. She just became family. So
Isn't that
yeah,
a blessing? It just happens like that sometimes. And those
yeah,
of us who experience that, it really is a blessing on all sides.
yeah. And we didn't realize she was already family. It was that when she asked, I mean, I would have
Right.
offered if I'd have thought that she looked at us that way. And I looked at her that way. So it was really interesting. So Sarah, your book really touched me on that level. How did you navigate writing such a painful experience?
When everything was happening, when Sarah was sick, I didn't think about writing about it because it just seemed like there was no words for it, for that
Yeah.
painful experience. And I didn't think about it at all. But as a writer, as I know you
Yes.
know, after she died, like that's how we process things. We write
Mhm.
about them. And I have to say that when I did finally start writing the book, I went very slowly. I would write maybe 2 or 3 pages a day. I would work like 45 minutes a day. And I've cried a lot when I was writing that book. And I was in Dublin. The first draft I did, I was in Dublin for the summer. This
Okay.
was 2022. And it was a luxury because I was retired, but basically like even after just writing those 3 pages, I was just exhausted. So I left myself a lot of space. I really demanded very little of myself. When I think of that summer, I see myself like
Mm,
lying in bed and watching like normal people on, Netflix. I like watched all these Irish things and I just went on walks and I just because I was reliving it.
mhm.
I was reliving it and the book wouldn't have worked otherwise. And that's why I was scared to start writing it because I was like, this is only going to work if I remember,
How long did it
if I
take you to write
remember
that?
feeling it.
Yeah.
That first draft, it took me, was like probably about 3 months,
Okay.
working steadily every day. And then it was probably a year and 9 months of like, intensive editing.
Yeah. Well, readers love it. One of your reviewers called Sarah My Sarah a beautifully written gem of a book and said, if you have experienced a painful loss, this is the perfect book to help you feel not so alone. I can't think of a better tribute than that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it was really incredible. And I have gone through your reviews and they're very touching. So in Sarah My Sarah, you've written in the format that you call lyric prose. Please explain to listeners what lyric prose is and why you decided to write the book in that format.
So I was very involved with Sweden for probably about 10 years in the Swedish language. I didn't live there full time, but I traveled there frequently and I just really fell in love with the language and Swedish literature. And then, I think it was 2016, this book it's called Osebol. I'm going to spell it Osebol. It's been translated to English, so you can find it on Amazon.
Okay.
But it won Sweden's biggest literary prize, which is called the August Prize. So, it's like any prize, like the Booker Prize or whatever, then like everyone buys that book and reads it. So I got that book and I was like, oh, this is a really big book. It's like 700 pages. But then I opened it and it was in a format that in Swedish is called lyric prose. So lyric prose it's not poetry. It's basically prose, but with shorter lines. Like instead of having prose be this thing that flows like this, you have like shorter lines. You break the sentences maybe in places you don't expect. It's like a column.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed it to a friend of mine before I put the book out when I had like a review copy. And he was like, oh, it's like reading like a feed on my phone. And he
Yeah.
said, I really like this because there's a lot of space. It doesn't demand a lot of me. Um, so lyric prose is a direct translation from the Swedish. In America, in English, I've seen it translate as prose poetry, but it's
Yeah.
not poetry. Um, and the thing is, when I read this book, Osebol, I was just taken by the form. There was just something so direct about it and so easy to read and so impactful. Because like if you have a line and it only has like 3, 4, or 5 words on it, like it's like every word really, really counts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also very beautiful too. And it's also kind of more fun than prose and more fun than prose, not as difficult as poetry because
Yeah.
a lot of my editing was just deciding where to break the lines and just moving a word. It was really fascinating. It's like, oh, that sounds right. I don't know why it sounds right, but it does. So yeah, so I read that book and I liked it a lot. And the writer also wrote another book, and I read that too, also in this form. And I became like a fangirl for her in Stockholm. Like whenever she was reading, I would be there, and And then I started noticing other books were written like that in Swedish. And I actually started reading this one novel for a book club I was in. And the novel was written in lyric prose. And I was like, can you do that? But you can. It's a very flexible form. So I think in Sweden, because this book won this enormous prize, people know about this form. In America, I think not so much. But the reason why I wanted to write it, I knew right away I wanted to write the book in this form. And when I think about it, I think it's because it's like I was saying, when Sarah was sick, like it was hard to talk about. I couldn't find the words. People be like, how are you doing? How's Sarah? And it's like, I'm either going to give you like 10 seconds or 5 hours.
Mm.
It's not, and every second counted, every word counted. And so that's what I like about lyric prose. Like I said, it's impactful. And
Mhm.
it was it was hard to write. It was hard to write about these things. And in a way, even though the lyric prose flows, I think just the kind of because it's condensed, it's more, I think it's stronger somehow. So so it worked for me to do that.
I didn't see that it was available in Audible or any kind of recording. Is it?
No, I haven't
No?
done that yet. I think there might be more and more with AI. There might be inexpensive ways to have audiobooks. You can have like a computer read it, but I haven't done that yet. So no,
Well, the
it
reason
would be great to do.
yeah, but the reason I asked is because when I was reading it, I really like recorded books because being busy, I can always plug it in and, if I'm vacuuming or driving or, if I'm doing something where I could spend the time, hearing a story and I don't have to read it. And your story has went really quickly because of the way it was written. When I sit down to read a book, I have to parse out the time. I bought your book not intending to read it right away. And I looked inside because I was interested in the way you wrote it. And then I looked at it, and the next thing I knew, I was 5 pages in, and I thought, well, this okay, clear the calendar. I'm doing this today, So, and I didn't expect to. It does flow. There's something attractive to the brain about the way it's positioned on the page and about the flow and everything. And I just think that if you do decide to have it recorded, that a human narrator is going to have a much easier time with this book than the typical book.
I think
So,
you're right because it's really clear where to like pause and things like that. I think that's true. So that's a
absolutely.
good idea. Yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your marketing journey, the positives and the surprises and the, maybe difficult. Yep.
So I think I really started marketing with social media like 2019 when I published my Swedish mystery called The Grand Man. And it was actually one of Sarah's daughters who introduced, and a
Oh.
friend of hers, they introduced me to like Instagram. I was like, what's Instagram? What's a hashtag? And so I found a way to find reviewers there. You just like, if you have a mystery, you hashtag Swedish mystery. It's like, who's reviewed these books? And then you write to them. And I was really lucky. I connected with a lot of really great reviewers. And then my next book was a psychological thriller. And so I did the same thing. And a lot of people who like thrillers, they actually have thriller in their name
Mhm.
of, on Instagram. So it was very easy to find people because of very specific genre. And the book I did after that were horror short stories. Again, like this very specific genre. So now I have a memoir, and there are people who like memoirs. Like there's someone who's like, I
Mhm.
love memoirs. There are some people, but it's not quite a genre like the other ones. And also memoirs can be anything from like, I like memoirs about, athletes. I like memoirs about World War II. I like memoirs about addiction. I like memoirs about people losing weight. So there is a sub niche of memoirs, like, illness memoirs, and then there's like cancer memoirs, and then there's brain cancer memoirs, and
Mhm.
it's a very small niche, but I've actually, now that Sarah's done, the book is done, I have started reading them, and it's very interesting. It's a very, very small niche. So I have to say, I don't know. I mean, to say to people, do you want to read a book about brain cancer? It's not, it's a little hard to market. And one of the things that happened was, now that I have some nice relationships with different reviewers. So I'll always write to them when I have a new book and like, hey, I have a new book, it's about this. And so with this book, though, I just said, I'm totally changing genre, and it's a pretty heavy theme. So if you feel like this isn't going to work for you, no worries, just let me know. I'll catch you next time. And it was very interesting because a couple people did come back to me and say, you know what, cancer's super triggering for me. I'm going to pass on this. And I was like, no problem. But then there were people like the review you said, that is she's actually a really, really good author. She had her debut novel. Her name is C. Fitton. And she goes by the name Pugs and Pages on Instagram. And she had a loss in her family. So she was like, this is perfect timing. And another reviewer, her name is Sarah, and she's Swedish. She said, oh, I lost my dad a year ago to cancer. Perfect. You know what I mean? So it could go either way.
Yeah.
Um, but I did not have the same success finding people through Instagram. It was really, really hard. There's very few people who identify themselves as like memoir readers, and then like, people that read books about illnesses. But I did find some people. And you know what I realized about this book and the marketing, which was really good? It's like, I always appreciate when people review my books. I really do.
Yes.
But for this one, I had even more special appreciation. I had appreciation for the reviewers who knew me and were willing to change genres with me. And I had appreciation for the new reviewers. So I've met and some really, really nice people I hadn't worked with before have reviewed the book. And I have to say, one of my favorites is, I saw this woman, she had, I contacted her because I saw this one book, Grief is the Thing with Feathers. I saw that she'd done something with it. So I contacted her and she said, oh, I don't write reviews. What I do is I have a scarf collection, extensive scarf collection. So if you send me your book, I'll find a scarf for it.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, that sounds good. I saw her Instagram page is beautiful. It's all these scarves with these books. And I said, okay. I said, do you charge for that? She said, just do it because I like it. And she just found the most beautiful scarf. It is the most beautiful pictures. So I've really encountered some really cool people, and I just really, really appreciate all of them. So it was sort of like, I couldn't be thinking about numbers. I don't do a lot of that anyway, but
Yeah.
it was just like, okay, like I knew this jazz musician, Art Landy, and I remember he does abstract jazz, avant-garde jazz. And he says that sometimes he has concerts and there's only like 6 people there. He said, but you know what? They're the right 6 people.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that's what I thought about this book. I thought, okay, I'm not getting because the other ones, like I really got like dozens of reviews on Instagram, and this one I was like, okay, no, but they're the exact right reviewers for this book.
This will find its way. It is, it's not, okay. Not only is it a subject that people might feel triggered about, and I don't think everyone would, but there will be people that'll pick it up and say, well, I don't think I can read this, but they're going to have that book then, and there will come a day when they may be able to read it. So, this is going to be a book that will find its place over time. And this is the purest form of writing, really. We all, when we are reading something, we become the other person, we become the character. And in a
Mhm.
memoir, you're becoming a real person, not an invention.
Huh.
So you're stepping into somebody's shoes, quite literally. So I think that you will find that you will, over time and word of mouth, and possibly hooking yourself up with some of the little odd places. A friend of mine wrote a book called Her Cup Runneth Over, and it was her breast cancer journey. And it was started being
Oh,
recommended by the therapist that we all get sent to when we get that diagnosis.
oh,
So that because she didn't write the day by day, this is what's going to happen to you. How is it going to be for chemo? How is it going to be for radiation? Instead, she wrote really almost a journal. And that's
mhm,
kind of the way I see your book. It's a little bit almost like you were writing a journal. And I think that people, especially survivors, not necessarily cancer victims or survivors, well, but people who are along for the ride
mm.
will look at this and say, "Oh, yeah, I get that. Yeah." So, and they're the forgotten people too. When somebody's going through something, I did, and you and I talked about this a little bit before the interview that when I was going through cancer, my kids and my husband were invisible to everyone. They didn't, nobody asked how they were doing. So I really enjoyed your book
Yeah.
for that reason because I was looking at it and realizing what went on behind the scenes. Yes, I was busy trying to survive, but in the meantime, there were people who were trying to help me survive and also not crying in my presence and, you know, all those other things. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I said to you that, the caregivers need caregiving. I think also with Sarah, maybe it is a little bit of a different angle because like, not her partner. I'm not a blood relative,
Yes.
but I'm a friend. But it really like, losing a friend is a special kind of loss. And she has a lot of friends. And
Yeah.
so yeah, but thank you for what you said. I think yeah, the book will be there for people when they need it. I think it that's my hope
Well, and your
that it could
purpose for
possibly, yeah.
right, and your purpose in writing it was, as I said, the purest form. Why do we write these things? Because they're stories that need to be told. So,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
sometimes we write stories for ourselves. So, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. It was a combination of those, I think. I mean, part of me was, Sarah she was a regular person like us, but I just think she handled her illness with a great deal of courage. And I
yeah.
just wanted to, and I wanted to kind of bring her to life through the book. I wanted to express my own emotions. I just wanted to tell the story. And also my mom,
Hmm. Yeah.
just to kind of bring them to life again.
Beautiful tribute to both. And also I don't want potential readers to get the idea that this is just a sad book. It's obviously dealing with a difficult
Mhm.
subject, but it's also eloquent. It's full of love and caring and moments of triumph. So yes, it's a very
Thank you. I
highly
appreciate
recommended.
that. Wow, that's so nice of you. And there's some pretty goofy humor in there too. So,
Yeah, there is.
but that's the whole point. That's part of the resilience, just the humor.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Florence, it's been an honor. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Readers, as always, I will leave the links below so you can find Florence, her books, her passion projects, and stay abreast of all of her activities. And just a heads up, because I just got some questions from listeners. Yes, the links do update. If I find out that the author is doing something or new, I will update the links. So definitely keep an eye on that. And please remember the nicest thing you can do for an author is leave a review. You don't have to write much. Just give it some stars if that's all you've got time for. It's the book version of
That's
like
true.
and subscribe. Yeah. And while we're on the topic, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Writer if you haven't already, so you'll never miss another episode. And so we can keep bringing you new authors. It was really a pleasure. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you, Kat. I look forward to following your channel. And I'm going to send some of my writer friends your way too.
I'd love that. I'd love that. I love references. So thank you so much.